I mean, I suppose if you're the Duke of Westminster and your wedding's going to be all over the front pages, are you going to want the spare there or are you going to want the heir and the future king? It very much highlights the rift between William and Harry. Can you imagine the awkwardness if he had to show Harry and Meghan, or even just Harry, to his pew?
Hello, I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor of The Sun, and welcome to our show, Royal Exclusive. With me today is Royal author Katie Nicholl. Hello, Katie. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Matt.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me on the show.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, we are both free today to do the show because we don't have an invite to the Society Wedding of the Year.
I know what happened. Mine got lost in the post. Were you NFI'd?
I was NFI'd, okay. Unsurprisingly. But we're talking about, this is Hugh Grosvenor, who is, it's not a royal wedding, but it has royal flavours because we know Prince William has turned up. Prince Harry was invited, but politely turned it down. What do you make of this wedding? The fact that it's kind of encapsulated the two brothers in many ways and their situation with Britain and the royal family.
Well, it does exactly that. I mean, I think, you know, we Brits love a wedding. We love a royal wedding. We're not going to have another one for a while. So this sort of fits the bill because it's about as royal as you get for a non-royal wedding. This is the wealthiest, I think he's one of the wealthiest men in Britain. What is his fortune?
He's the wealthiest under 40.
Okay, so there you go. 10
billion pounds.
Extraordinary. So, I mean, you can guarantee it's going to be a great reception. The vintage Dom Perignon is going to be flowing. And the pews are going to be packed with some pretty powerful and impressive people. And, of course, some of Britain's most famous and oldest aristocratic families. So you'll have the Van Cutsums, you know, all of those families that are sort of not royal but mingle with royalty. And I think, you know, to your point, it very much highlights the rift between William and Harry, because ordinarily both of them would have been at this wedding. Hugh, or Hughie as is known to his friends, is very close to both William and Harry. He's one of those few friends that has retained that connection with both of them. He's godfather to Archie and he's godfather to George. And I think he must have been in a very difficult position when it came to the guest list and which brother was going to come and which wasn't. And, well, I understand he had a conversation with Harry. There was an invite to Harry, as well as to William. And Harry was diplomatic and said it's a long way to come from California, which, of course, he would have done ordinarily. But it would have been hugely awkward having both brothers there, and William as an usher at today's service. So can you imagine the awkwardness if he had to show Harry and Meghan, or even just Harry, to his pew? So
William is an usher, and if Harry had been invited, he would have had to have shown his brother to his seat. I
mean, I'm sure William would like to show Harry where to go right now, but in the case of that, yeah, I mean, he would potentially, as an usher, his job is to show guests where they're sitting. And I just think any encounter would have been deeply awkward. I mean, they came together, of course, for the unveiling of the statue of Princess Diana. We know they can do it, and again at the late Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, but I think unless they absolutely have to. And of course, you know, all of the headlines would be about the brothers and this rift, when this is actually a really important society wedding, and I think it would detract from certainly the bride and groom of the day, and no one would want that. We understand that William's trying to keep a low profile. He did sneak in quite quietly because he wanted it to be about, the bride and groom. And I think you've written about this as well, that Harry was invited, but there was an acknowledgement between Hughie and Harry that if he turned up, it'd be better for both sides. Is this diplomatic language, is this diplomatic spin that we are being told, or do you think that is the true story behind it? Look, I think knowing that Hughie is very close to both of the brothers, he was obviously in a difficult position, and I think, he was never going to invite one and not the other. I think his hope was that, Harry would gracefully bow out of this one, which is exactly what happened. I mean, I suppose if you're the Duke of Westminster and your wedding's going to be all over the front pages, are you going to want the spare there or are you going to want the heir and the future king? I mean, the optics, of course, are better for Prince William to be there. And I think, it just highlights this divide, doesn't it? You've got these two royal camps operating. You've got the court of Montecito with Harry and Meghan, and the Hollywood society that they are engaging with and flirting with and entertaining with. But when it comes to sort of everything that's royal or aristocratic and British, I think it's going to be William that sort of comes top in the pecking order. So I think it's played out how it should. But yeah, I do think Harry was invited, and I think he's done the diplomatic thing by staying away. This is the life that, he has to face up to. Yeah, this is the reality of his situation. I mean, he left the royal family. I think a lot of people would say he didn't do it in the most respectful way. And I think he's lost a lot in the process. It's interesting, I was speaking to someone who spends quite a lot of time with Harry and Meghan in Montecito, and I said, well, how is he doing? Yeah. Not going to this wedding, not coming over for trooping, probably not being a part of any of the sort of British events that are taking place over the summer. And this person said, actually, he's really happy. He's loving his life in Montecito. Him and Meghan are really happy. He's having this sort of quiet, below-the-radar life that he's always wanted. And I thought, well, OK, well, good for him if that is the case, because he's given up a huge amount when you consider it, and the relationships that have suffered, you know, the fact that he's barely on speaking terms with his brother, who he's always been so close to. It feels like he's made a huge sacrifice. So I'm actually really pleased to hear that he's happy. That's
good. I mean, I don't wish him to have a horrible life in California. You know, we hope he is successful when he is.
But he's given up a lot in the process.
And friends as well. I do know that when he came over when did he come over recently for
the Invictus ceremony?
Things,
yeah,
he did meet up with a couple of friends there and have dinner.
And he does. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out he does still have friends here. It's not like he's lost them all. But I think, as you see, and as is so well highlighted by this society wedding, there are divided loyalties. There are always going to be, and there are some who are going to stay in William's camp, some who stay in Harry's. But I think, you know, I think there's a piece in the Mail saying how many friends he's lost along the way, and I think he probably has lost some friends, but that core group of friends he still speaks to, he still comes over and sees people like Mark Dyer and Guy Pelly, go and have a drink with them at a pub in Chelsea. We never hear about it, but it happens.
Did you think that the friends have taken the side of William and other members of the royal family and are angry maybe with what Harry's done, or is it that they've just decided that it's better for them to, you know, it's an easier life for Harry's friends to kind of cosy up to William and members of the royal family?
Look, I think anyone that knows the brothers really well, you know, has probably empathy for both of them. And I think anyone who knows Harry well knows that he's always really wanted a way out of the royal family. You know, you've spoken to him, I've spoken to him. As he said on the record, you know, there were times he wished he'd never been born a prince. And I think he really is living the life he wants to live now. I just think it's very, very sad that it's played out the way it has. I personally think, Matt, that with better organisation, a bit more foresight in terms of how they wanted to leave the royal family and have this other life in America, I think there was a way of making it work. It just all felt very hastily sketched out, not thoroughly thought through, and the repercussions are still being felt because of that today.
And for many years as well.
To come.
But, look, we've all been to weddings where a guest has been uninvited or diplomatically avoided the invitation. So it even happens to the billionaires of this world.
It does. There's no getting away from it.
Stay tuned. There's loads more to come in the rest of the show.
He'll have been watching those D-Day commemorations. You know, he's a soldier. He was a soldier. That is a big part of his life. It must just be a pretty stomach-clenching moment for him, where it's that realisation that despite what he did, despite serving those tours, he wasn't a part of this because he's not a part of the working royal family. The one place I have been, although I didn't go to the wedding, one place I have been this week is to Portsmouth and Normandy for D-Day. The Portsmouth, I thought, was absolutely incredible. It was. Did you see the pictures of Queen Camilla? With tears in her eyes.
Yeah, I was a long way away from her at that point, but that was one of the most emotional parts of it. There was a veteran, Eric Bateman, was reading out his testimony. It was all about, the ceremonies have all been about hearing the veteran stories, because it might be the last time we hear from them in person at a major anniversary. But Camilla's tears made the front pages of all the papers. It's quite rare to see that kind of emotion. What did you make of how the royals reacted? Well,
I think the royals play such an important part in events like this. Obviously, because the king is the head of the armed forces. I mean, the late Queen Elizabeth served, didn't she, as a driver in the in a branch of the army when she was a young princess. George VI's connection with Queen Elizabeth when they went to visit Buckingham Palace after it had been blitzed, and you know, it was the time when the late Queen Mother said she could actually look the East End in the eye. These connections to war are as old and long as the royal family is. So I think it's really important that that connection is retained. And I think Camilla, don't forget, had a father who served as well. He was a serving officer, Major Bruce Shand. So, you know, she was the daughter of a serving officer. So there'll be a personal element to that as well for her. And I think those that emotion in her face and also in the King's face is very, very genuine. They were clearly very moved by the stories that they heard, and I think, very, very honoured to be there. So I think it's important, and yes, the royals very rarely let their guard down when it comes to showing emotion. But I actually think Camilla can be quite emotional. She's, when you see her on events like Commemorative Sunday at the Cenotaph, you see her very visibly moved. You get the sense that these occasions really resonate with her. She feels them on a really personal level. And I think for that veteran community, that's really important.
I think she was speaking for a lot of people as well. The tears, I love that picture because the tears were, many people that were at the Portsmouth ceremony were kind of experiencing those same feelings when the stories are being told, and it just works for me because we know when we see her at events and stuff like that, she is kind of a little bit more down to earth and shows
very empathetic.
Yeah,
like she has a real ability to relate to people, and I think she and the King were very moved to hear those stories. And I love particularly the footage of the King reading his grandfather's entry on D-Day. The day that Britain, the Allies, stormed the northern coast of France. And, when you see a historical document like that and to hear Charles reading from it, I think it's really powerful, it's really poignant. And I think, you were lucky, really lucky, Matt, to be over there in Normandy. I would have loved to have been over there to have witnessed it. But over here in Britain, there's been a real support for these commemorations, to mark 80 years since those D-Day landings. And as you say, the veterans that were there, we don't know how long we're going to have them for. And so it feels very much like the final part of an era. That sort of era that we felt has gone with the Queen, there's still a few of that generation left today. And we need to honour their legacy, honour their memory, and show them the respect that they are due.
Well, the King completely did that because obviously he did Portsmouth. And then he went to Normandy for the British ceremony.
Yep.
And Prince William attended the World Leaders event. There were some eyebrows about William going to the World Leaders event. I can tell you my understanding. You'll be able to read this in The Sun. I'll give a royal exclusive for royal exclusive. But what actually happened was, because obviously the King's still having his cancer treatment, he was desperate to go. He had cancer treatment on Tuesday. He was at a London hospital in good spirits. He was with his doctor and with his staff. He'd gone into a hospital for the cancer treatment, but he was so keen to get to both events. They carefully calibrated the Portsmouth event. They took 45 minutes off it, so he arrived late. It wasn't like his helicopter had run late or anything like that. He arrived 45 minutes into the event for medical reasons, because he was recovering from the cancer treatment. Then he immediately went off to France. Was in France for the British event, and then he left before the international event with William, Biden, Zelensky, and not Rishi Sunak attended. The British Prime Minister didn't bother going to the international ceremony, but it was he was desperate to go to both. The cancer treatment is obviously, people go through cancer treatment. It's something that it is hard. He has to have it regularly, but he was so keen to get to both of them. That's why Prince William, and people have been asking why was Prince William there with the world leaders. That's why Prince William went to the international event. William at the international event, how do you think he got on? Do you think he did a good job there?
Yeah,
was it good to see him?
I thought his speech was very powerful and very moving. I think we're becoming more used to seeing William on the stage as very much taking on that sort of diplomatic statesman role, and he does it very, very well. He's in a difficult position, Matt. He's got a wife who's going through cancer treatment, and I think we all felt her absence very, very acutely over the past 2 days. Even William said she would have loved so much to have been there, and she would have done. So you're feeling that for him there. Of course, it would have been an absolute honour and a privilege for him to have represented his father at the ceremony that you were at the end of the day. He would have had no problem with that. But it's just all a reminder of, I think, how much weight and burden is falling to William. Now, he makes it look effortless. I mean, he did that impromptu walkabout yesterday, didn't he? Meeting veterans in the French town, and wasn't expecting that. He loves to have that face-to-face connection. And what I think is interesting is he is just as comfortable doing that as he is with meeting world leaders. He's playing the role of Prince of Wales brilliantly, perfectly, but I think it's a huge burden on him at the moment. He is going through a lot, and I think in all of this, it's a reminder that the royals are just human like the rest of us. But I thought your report was fascinating. It was really interesting to know what's going on behind the scenes, and that, you know, Charles is having not only brilliant medical care, obviously the best of the best, but he's able to do it and go to these events. I mean, this was non-negotiable. That's what he said to his team. It's what he said to his medical team and the team at the palace. He had to be there, just like he has to be at trooping. You know, it means he's not at today's wedding. It means that perhaps, you know, his schedule was adjusted a bit so as not to put too much pressure on him. He's not physically on his feet the whole time. But the point is, he was there for those moments. He gave 2 brilliant speeches, you know, and I think we needed our monarch at that event.
They were also concerned that and it did happen, the event would overrun.
Yeah.
So he was already in the air when it started, but they were, I think the last time it started 2 or 3 hours late at the 75th anniversary. It started late this time because Zelensky, Biden all arrived one by one, and it overran. So I think it was the right decision, and the right decision, you know, William was an able stand-in. But also, well, I was in the stand because there was a little kind of makeshift arena that they had built, and there was lots of children there. There was lots of French school children, they were. And when Zelensky came in, he got a big cheer, obviously. But when William came in, there were gasps and cheers. Honestly, I don't know if it got picked up on the TV cameras, but I was really surprised about how excited everyone was for seeing William.
Maybe they were expecting to see the king, and that's why people were surprised.
Right.
I don't know, but the fact that he had such a warm reception, as he did on that walkabout, I think shows the fondness for William. I think people recognise that he's doing a great job and doing it on his own because he doesn't have his wife by his side at the moment.
You point out that he doesn't have the Princess of Wales by his side, and I say we always, you know, wish her the best on the show and come back when you're ready. Do you know what I mean? Whenever
and no pressure from anyone for her to come back.
But you've done a story, royal correspondent at Vanity Fair. You've written a story this week. What can you tell us about it? It was about I think you think that she's turned a corner.
Yes, I've been told by sources very close to the Princess of Wales that she had struggled with the treatment initially. I mean, it's preventative chemotherapy. It's, you know, it's not a pleasant thing. No one wants to have this. You know, off the back of major surgery, a pretty long recovery period, and then she has to go through the treatment. I think it was a struggle initially, and I was very, very relieved to hear from actually more than one source that she has recently turned a corner. She's been spotted out and about with her children. So while she can't be at events like the D-Day commemorations and she's not going to be at trooping, just to know that she's up and about and being able to be a mum, which for her is the most important job, I think is very, very encouraging. And we all wish her, you know, the very best with this treatment. We wish her a speedy recovery. And there was a story, I don't know if you've spoken about this on the show before, but I think it was a story in one of the US websites that or in one of the US magazines that she's not going to be returning to work in the same capacity again. I really think this is not the case. Everything I hear is that she will be back to work. She's coming back 100% to pick up as the Princess of Wales and do the great work she was doing before. It will just be in her time when she's ready and, crucially, when she gets the sign-off from her medical team.
2 things from that. I mean, if she's doing better or, you know, she's turned a corner, the fact that William was able to go and do 2 days of engagements and attend the wedding means that he's able to leave the Princess of Wales at home for 3 days.
100%.
Yes, which is a really good sign. You made me think of that. That's a really positive
Yeah, if she wasn't
signal.
well, you know, he would probably be, and he has pulled out of events, as we know before. So I think it's all very, very encouraging.
You spoke there about the reports in, you know, American media. There's a lot of rubbish that's being written across Europe and on TV in Europe and stuff like that, and also in America. And it's kind of not our job to you know, to maybe clarify it, but it's our job to kind of just knock down some of the nonsense.
Yeah, I think that's
written.
A story worth knocking down.
Yeah, it's just not true. I mean, I sometimes get some European TV companies asking me certain questions because they've heard rumours that she's unwell and stuff like that.
Yeah,
she's not. I mean, we can say that, can't we? She is doing well.
She's doing well, and she's absolutely going to be coming back to work. You know, that is her intention. And I think, you know, while she's at home recovering and doing as much as she's doing, you know, these sorts of stories are not helpful and shouldn't be perpetuated. So for the record, she is coming back, but it will be in her own time. I think all of this, Matt, has shown just how vital she is to the monarchy. We need her. You know, she and William are the future. So if she needs to be out until the end of the year, it doesn't matter. To know that this is the time she needs to get better so that she can come back and do the important work that she started as Princess of Wales, that's the most important thing. There's no hurry.
We've both done stories with the Princess of Wales. We've both been on engagements with her. What are your memories? Are there any fond memories of times that you've spent with the Princess of Wales at home or abroad?
There's been lots of lovely times. I mean, I've always found her to be engaging and warm and kind, and she would always ask about my children. I remember, you know, as sort of working mothers, often being on royal tours, you know, she didn't always take the children with her. And I remember really bonding with her over how difficult it was being away from our children while we were on royal tours. And both of our children were being looked after by our mothers. And we were both laughing about the fact that they were probably being plied with chocolate buttons and crisps or whatever else and having all those naughty treats. But of course, wonderful time with their grandparents. So, you know, there's a real human there. She is a real person. And I think we've seen her frailty. I think most people don't get to see her sense of humour, and she does have a really great sense of humour. I've been in many unusual situations with her and William. I mean, I think probably the most unusual was being in an earthquake in India on one of the royal tours and catching up with them after the event when, thank goodness, we were all safe. And having a pretty stiff drink at the sort of off-the-record drinks reception just to calm our nerves.
Where was that? Tell me a bit about that. Was that in?
That was our tour to India. They did a tour of India and Bhutan, and they were at a national park. We were ahead of them. We'd arrived in the major city, but this earthquake was so big, they felt it more acutely in the national park. But you know, me and the royal press pack were just checking into our hotels, and literally the chandeliers are shaking, and you were feeling the earth move under your feet, and it was pretty scary. I have to say, it was one of those moments you don't forget. When they were safely with us at the next destination, we did just sort of meet for this off-the-record drinks to just, you know, convene, have a conversation, and I can't tell you the details of it, but it was funny and proved that she does have a sense of humour. I get the impression that William was more alarmed by the earthquake probably than she was, but no, we're very lucky to have these moments with them and to observe her. And I have to say, I also always enjoy being on engagements around her early years, watching her with kids, because I think that's where she comes to life and she interacts so well with children. And you can see that she's in her element. And, you know, this is the work that she wants to get back to doing.
Excellent. Stay tuned. There's loads more to come in the rest of the show.
Harry and William had that moment involving the dog bowl. Quite like to know what really happened. Yeah. So I'd like to ask the Duke of Sussex, do you regret leaving? Did
you do many jobs with the Duke of Sussex, as he is now known? Or
yeah, I mean, I went to Ireland with him and Meghan when they did one of their early tours. Of course, that big tour of South Africa when we got to see Archie for the first time. And, you know, certainly in the early years of my reporting, when I was doing my book, William and Harry, which must have been back in around 2010, going on those brilliant tours with William and Harry together. We did an amazing tour around Africa with them, which ended up in South Africa with the World Cup. You know, and they were just such a brilliant, dynamic team. They were so much fun to follow. So I do feel genuine sadness to sort of be reporting on this rift between them because, look, we've read Harry's book Spare. He paints a different picture of the relationship, but what I saw of them together as brothers, you know, was a special relationship.
Well, Harry, talking about his brothers, Harry spoke a lot about his brother in his book and also on the Harry and Meghan Netflix show, which we haven't forgotten, but viewers may seem to have forgotten because I think it's. I've got some figures here. So the Netflix show Harry and Meghan, it's now slumped to 211. On the Netflix global chart.
Right.
David Beckham documentary is #1, which is kind of apt because David Beckham has quietly removed himself from Harry and Meghan's area of friendship, hasn't he? Oh, he was recently actually. He's joined the King's Foundation.
Hanging out with the King.
Yeah, he's been hanging out with the King.
Bonding over bees.
Yeah, that's Beckham and the King. I love this. But are you surprised that people have switched off from the Netflix show?
I think we need to make the point, Matt, just to be fair, the Beckham's documentary obviously has come out more recently, so you'd expect it to be up there higher on the Netflix charts. You know, I think everyone's had a chance to watch Harry and Meghan's series once, if not twice, if they could stomach it. But I do think perhaps it's just indicative of the international viewing's appetite of the whole Harry and Meghan story. And I think perhaps people just feel it is time to move on from that narrative. They've done a big deal with Netflix. There's a lot of pressure on them to come up with original content. I mean, I personally really enjoyed Harry's Invictus Games documentary, but that also didn't do so well. I don't know what the figures are like now. But I think there is pressure on them to come up with something new, something that's going to get bums on seats. I personally would love to see a sort of fly-on-the-wall series about their lives in Montecito in California, like the next chapter of their lives, what we're doing now.
The Only Way is Sussex.
The Only Way is Sussex.
Yeah. Well, I wonder about the Netflix show, whether they were actually after views. I think the Harry and Meghan show that they did, they were after the money, because they needed money when they were out there, and the only way they could get the money was to talk about what happened, and they were after just getting their story out. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, I think that's a major point.
I don't think they were worried about their views. Now they're going to have to start worrying about, because everyone was going to watch it anyway. Now on their new projects, they're going to have to start working out how they get eyeballs on Meghan's cookery show, for instance, or Harry's polo show.
No, absolutely, and I think that's the challenge for them, because it's all very well having a multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix, but if your content is not getting bums on seats, anyone can get dropped. So, yeah, I think the next project's going to be interesting to see.
Good. Just a word on Harry. I don't want to completely make all these shows always about Prince Harry, but I'm just thinking about the D-Day commemorations, just going back to that.
Yeah.
Harry's fought in Afghanistan.
Well, he's the only member of the royal family to have fought on the front line twice.
Yeah, exactly. In another parallel universe, Harry would have been there.
Of course he would, Matt. And it's like every time we cover the cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday, you think, gosh, anyone if there's anyone that's earned the right to be there and to lay a wreath, it is Prince Harry, because he fought for his queen, for his country, in Afghanistan twice. And I can only imagine, and we were talking about how happy he is out in Montecito, and I believe he is, but he'll have been watching those D-Day commemorations. He's a soldier. He was a soldier. That is a big part of his life, as we know through the Invictus community. And again, I think it must just be a pretty sort of stomach clenching moment for him, where it's that realisation that despite what he did, despite serving those tours, he wasn't a part of this, because he's not a part of the working royal family.
These are the repercussions of burning bridges in this way,
They are.
Yeah, I wonder, we don't know what he was currently, we don't know whether he did anything in Montecito to...
Well, if he did, he didn't mark it publicly. And you'll remember that one Remembrance Sunday when him and Meghan were photographed laying a wreath, and that backfired on them
like that at all.
So badly. Yeah. So I think, maybe they've learnt from things like that. But yeah, it must have been a hard moment for him to have watched these 2 days of commemorations in Normandy and Britain, and to know that, despite being a soldier, he wasn't able to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, as I say, they were the 2 days. And like the pictures, the footage, really doesn't do justice sometimes to the actual event itself. You did pick up on William when he went out to see the veterans, because he'd gone for lunch. He'd gone for lunch in Arromanch. I probably pronounced it incorrectly. And I think he'd gone to a private visit to the D-Day Museum, and it wasn't meant to be an event for the press and public, but there was several veterans that saw him go in, and they said, well, we'd like to, can we meet William? So William's security staff were there, because the whole place had been closed down because Biden and Macron and stuff. The place was security everywhere, and so they looked around and thought, okay, it wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah.
William said, I'd quite like to go out and meet those veterans.
Yeah.
It was a really nice little moment.
I love that spontaneity about the Prince of Wales, and I think we've both been on tours and visits when he'll make a detour, he'll spot someone in the crowd, or he'll see a poster, or he'll see something, he'll be drawn to it, and he's not afraid to go off-piste when it comes to his schedule sometimes, and I think that's when you get lively copy, it's when you get great pictures, and it's when you get the best stories.
It is. Right, talking of best stories,
yes.
Can we talk about some of your best stories? Not stories you've written, but stories that you can remember.
OK.
So we have some regular quick-fire questions.
Oh, God, you're going to put me on the spot now. OK, go on.
No, these are perfectly fine, honestly. Right, so firstly, if you were to have a dinner party with 3 members of the royal family, past or present, who would you invite and why? I don't have to restrict it to 3. If you've got 4 or 2, you can say whatever you like.
Well, I mean, obviously, the late Queen Elizabeth, I would love to reincarnate her and be able to have a wonderful dinner with her, because when you consider everything that the Queen saw over her reign, she did have the most extraordinary perspective and insight, and just think she would have been wonderful to have met. Love to sit down with the Princess of Wales, because I do find that idea, I mean, Kate, not Diana, that idea of the commoner who just happened to fall in love with a prince, marry into the most famous family in the world, inherit that iconic weighty title of the Princess of Wales, and I think she would be absolutely fascinating to sit down with, and I'd actually really like to sit down with her mum Carol too. I know she's not technically a member of the royal family, but I think she would be a lot of fun. She'd have some wonderful stories to tell, and apparently she's quite lively after a gin and tonic, so she's my kind of person.
That's a great idea. I forgot about Carol.
Good old Carol.
I haven't heard from Carol for ages.
But you know what? On a serious note, she has been the most amazing mother to Kate, and she has stepped in whenever her daughter has needed her, and I think now more. She was always there in the background when the children were born. She takes such an active role in the raising of those children. You know, the Wales children are that perfect hybrid of royal and sort of modern, normal kids. And that's largely down to Kate's family. And of course, now as Kate goes through her own cancer journey, she will be leaning very heavily on Carol, and Carol will be there for her.
When the Princess of Wales was in hospital, William was taking the children to Bucklebury to see Carol and Michael.
Absolutely. And those kids have had that normality. They've had that wonderful freedom with the Middleton family. And I think that's why they will be very well-rounded and happy children.
Carol Middleton's a great shout.
She's great.
That's a great shout. Well done. What do you think has been the... Oh, this is a sadder one. What do you think has been the biggest royal crisis in the last 50 years?
Well, I think when you consider, Matt, what you and I have covered over the last sort of 4 years or since the death of the Duke of Edinburgh, it's not been a crisis as such, but it has been a massively transformative period for the royal family. You know, the evolution, you and I were saying before we came on air, the stories we've covered, it has been non-stop. So that's certainly been the most, I think, epic period for me as a royal correspondent, because I've presented at the Queen's funeral, at the coronation, the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral for the BBC, big moments. But in terms of crisis, well, I think it's probably the death of Diana, because I think the impact that had on the royal family, the backlash it had on the Queen, who'd really never put a foot wrong, who'd never been on the receiving end of criticism, it was just so pivotal. It spawned a series, it spawned a film. It's an iconic moment that, you know, anyone of our age, and certainly over, will always remember. I mean, that was a crisis. We're obviously too young to remember the abdication, but I mean, that's the obvious one that predates it.
It's you mentioned earlier about the last 4 years. It's an era.
Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be one kind of thing. It's an era that's stretched over 4 or 5 years. And with the death of Queen Elizabeth II, I thought that might be a crisis, but it didn't. There was almost like a seamless.
It was.
Into the king, and now we accept that he's the king and he's King Charles. There were people.
Which I think is why, Matt, it makes his illness and the fact that he, for briefly, had to sort of take his foot off the pedal when he was so clearly wanting to be in his stride as king, tough. And I'm so pleased that he's been able to do D-Day. It's going to be wonderful to see him at Trooping.
Right. Talking of major events, if you could be a fly on the wall at any royal moment, what would it be and why?
OK, so I'd quite like to have been a fly on the wall at the Sandringham Summit when everything was being... because that must have been a pretty tense moment. Yeah. Or perhaps it might have been the time at Nottingham Cottage when Harry and William had that moment involving the dog bowl. Quite like to know what really happened.
I'd like to hear William's side of the story.
So would I.
Yeah. Final question. If you could ask any royal one question on the record, what would that question be? And
they have to answer honestly.
They have to answer honestly, yeah.
So I'd like to ask the Duke of Sussex, do you regret leaving? Yeah. And I'd like an honest answer.
What do you think his answer would be?
I wonder if he might say that he has some regrets over how he left. But I actually ultimately think this is probably what he wanted. I don't think he wanted to fall out with his family the way he has. Yeah.
Well, that takes us back to the beginning. The fact that he hasn't attended the wonderful wedding.
He won't be there today.
Excellent. Well, there's great pictures, there's great footage, and you know, we wish the billionaire couple all the best in there.
We do. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Katie. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed yourself, please subscribe to our channel so you never miss a show.